Good evening, welcome to Scotland at 7. It's the 14th of January. Joining me on tonight's programme, we have Karen Adam, the SNP candidate for Banff-and-Buchan. Welcome to the programme, Karen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And also joining us this evening, Siobhan Tolland, well-known writer and activist. Hi, Siobhan, how are you?
Not bad, how are you?
I'm fine, Siobhan. So we're going to get on, first of all, with the coronavirus update. And as of 2 o'clock today, a total of 1,473,485 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres, and since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,316,406 were confirmed negative. 157,079 were positive. There are 1,707 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. There were also 64 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. This will be an underestimate of the number of cases. Not everyone with the virus will display the symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 1,829 were in hospital last night, 142 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have now died from complications caused by coronavirus COVID-19 infections stood at 5,166. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest daily UK figures are delayed due to an issue with the processing of deaths data. And also in the news tonight, South America international border health measures have been introduced. Following the identification of a new variant of coronavirus in Brazil, the Scottish Government will impose additional restrictions on arrivals from South America, as well as several countries with strong travel links to affected countries. In addition to the South American nations of Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, French Guyana, Paraguay, Peru, Suriname, Uruguay and Venezuela. This will also apply to Portugal, including the Azores and Madeira, to Panama and Cabo Verde, or Cape Verde, and the British Overseas Territory of the Falkland Islands. These travel restrictions will replicate measures that were put in place for Denmark and South Africa and come into force at 4 o'clock on Friday, the 15th of January. Travellers who have been in any of these countries or territories in the past 10 days prior to their arrival in Scotland must isolate, along with all members of their household. No exemptions from isolation will apply. Qatar and the Caribbean islands of Aruba and Bonaire, St Eustace and Saba are also removed from the country exemption list at the same time. The UK government has confirmed that the implementation of pre-departure testing for arrivals into England is delayed until Monday morning to allow carriers and passengers additional time to prepare. The Scottish Government intended to introduce this additional measure on Friday the 15th of January, but it's necessary to also delay implementation to allow for coordination between the UK Government's regulations and the relevant Scottish regulations. Now, if you would like to join the conversation here tonight, you can of course do so on Twitter by following us at BroadcastScot and using the hashtag Scotland@7. And now tonight's main news. The Labour Party and Richard Leonard has resigned as the Scottish Labour leader. Richard Leonard has resigned as Scottish Labour leader, saying that it was in the best interests of the party for him to stand down before the May Holyrood elections. The Labour Party has fallen into third place in Scotland with just 23 MSPs and 1 MP. And there have been calls in the party for Leonard, who has struggled to lead an effective opposition, to stand down. In a statement, Richard Leonard said, "I've come to the conclusion that it's in the best interests of the party that I step aside as leader of Scottish Labour with immediate effect. This was not an easy decision, but after 3 years, I feel it was the right one for me and the party." The Labour leader Keir Starmer thanked Leonard for his work. Commenting on the resignation of the Scottish Labour leader Richard Leonard, SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown said, "This will have been a difficult decision to make. On behalf of the SNP and on a personal level, I sincerely wish Richard Leonard all the very best for the future. He clearly understands that voters in Scotland don't want a Labour Party which lines up behind Boris Johnson and signs up for a hard Brexit which threatens Scotland's economy and future prosperity." Karen, let me come to you first. As a relative newcomer to the programme, what was your reaction to hearing that Richard Leonard had decided to resign?
I didn't find it surprising at all, to be honest. I could see that coming. I was surprised in the fact that they've now thrown themselves into a selection contest 4 months before the Scottish Parliament elections, which is just going to cause even more chaos, for them as a party. I don't think it's Richard Leonard per se. I wish him well in his future endeavours and what he wants to do. But really, the Labour Party have become so irrelevant now in Scotland. We have, 40% of Labour supporters now in favour of independence, and Scottish Labour Party really seem to be listening more to their UK government, the UK Parliament counterparts than they are the Scottish people.
So you feel, Karen, that the Scottish Labour Party has become really a kind of extension of British Labour, and it's kind of, I don't know, become obsolete in Scottish politics now?
Yeah, and we saw that recently, with the recent vote in the Scottish Parliament. Our MSPs, our MPs, there was this confliction between them because the UK Labour Party were voting for this Brexit deal. And that really left Scottish Labour in a bit of a kerfuffle, should I say, and showed really where their priorities should be lying. And this confusion and fence-sitting is really uncomfortable for them at the moment, and people can see that. And what people like is a party that sticks by its principles and stands by, what it's saying and delivers. And Labour really haven't been delivering. They haven't been an effective opposition, and I doubt they could go through their Rolodex of who's going to be the next leader, but I don't think that's going to help them until they start actually listening to the voters and not their UK counterparts.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much, Karen, for that. Siobhan, what do you think? Would you agree with Karen's analysis there? Do you think Richard Leonard is basically a bit of a dinosaur? He represents a kind of Labour which no longer really exists in Scotland or has no relevance here?
Yeah, I would say so, but the issue perhaps that Labour has is they can change their leader as often as they like. It's not going to resolve the problems that the Labour Party has. It's a wee bit like just trying to paint over the cracks and just pretending that the subsidence isn't there. There are fundamental problems for the Labour Party now, and it kind of picking up on some of the things that Karen was just saying. The Labour Party are not relevant to Scotland because they are actually refusing to engage with the issues that Scotland want to engage with. And that is fundamentally the constitutional issues that now face us. The Labour Party's dogged, stubborn insistence that they do not engage with the right to self-determination or even the right to discuss self-determination will be their downfall. And they can keep changing leader, as Karen said, they can keep going round and round and round, but until they change their policy and engage with the people of Scotland on the right to self-determination, they will not get anywhere. And do you know what? If they don't do this, they will not survive in an independent Scotland. They're on a trajectory downwards. Richard Leonard, personally, he infuriated me because a good democracy and a good government needs strong opposition. But Richard was so out of his depth when it came to COVID. He could not see political discourse beyond a hatred for the SNP. And that was a shame, and that was quite sad. But it really restricted his political opposition within Parliament. I found it painful to watch Richard, if I'm honest. But who's going to replace them?
Well, Siobhan, what I was going to ask you is that we've also heard recently the new Labour's national leader at Westminster, Sir Keir Starmer, coming out and saying that he doesn't believe there should be a second independence referendum. Do you think that that kind of British policy in Scotland is one of the reasons why Labour is struggling so much?
Yeah, I think so. I think that in the same way that they were with Brexit, they're muddled. They're a party, I think, nationally in terms of UK and in Scotland. They've not adapted to the political changes of the last 10 years. They've not adapted to any of those kind of discussions and debates that we're having. With all due respect, for Sir Keir Starmer to turn around and yet another leader tell us what we can and cannot do. It doesn't bode well in Scotland. It really doesn't. And we can tell that by the polls, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Okay, Siobhan, thank you very much. Somebody has suggested recently that Gordon Brown might be the man to take over from Richard Leonard. Yeah, it's been on Twitter. I hear laughter there from you, Siobhan. You think that would be even worse than having Richard Leonard?
Are they really that? Don't you just feel for Labour? Do you know what? See, honestly, see the post-45 Labour, that was something to be really proud of, wasn't it? You know, Labour had an amazing history. It had an amazing history. It did some amazing things, and then you look at them now, and their choice is what? Gordon Brown. That can't be touted as a serious thing, surely.
Well, let's
That's
hope
desperate.
Not. Well, listen, anyway, we're going to move on as we were talking earlier on about the popularity of the SNP in polling. And an 18th poll in a row has shown support for Scottish independence. An 18th poll in a row has shown a majority of people in Scotland would back independence, with 57% of people supporting an independent Scotland. The poll, carried out by Savanta Comres for the Scotsman newspaper, also found strong support for the SNP and reported the worst polling for the Scottish Tories since 2016. Respondents to the poll continued to show confidence in the leadership of Nicola Sturgeon, and also show that more than 1 in 3 of the 2019 Scottish Labour voters would now vote for the SNP. Commenting, the SNP's deputy leader Keith Brown, MSP, said, "An 18th poll in a row showing support for Scotland's right to choose its future underlines that it's becoming the settled will of the people of Scotland. The SNP will take nothing for granted and will continue to work every day to defend and promote the interests of Scotland. People in Scotland have the right to decide their own future, instead of a Boris Johnson-led Tory government which has imposed a disastrous hard Brexit in the middle of a pandemic. The the Westminster system is broken, and Boris Johnson cannot continue with his Trump-style denial of the right of the people of Scotland to choose a better future. Scotland's future should be in Scotland's hands, not those of Boris Johnson." Also responding to the poll, the Scottish Greens co-leader Lorna Slater said, This is a welcome poll in the latest in a long line that suggests that the Scottish Greens can return a record number of MSPs in May. It's clear that the public appreciate the constructive approach that to opposition adopted by the Green MSPs, which has seen us punch well above our weight in Parliament and deliver bold and transformative policies. We'll continue to work constructively, pushing the government to build a fairer, greener Scotland. Karen, let's come to you first. Another poll. It's almost as if they're just coming out of a sausage machine, isn't it? Another poll with support for independence in the high 50s, so 57%, coming close to the existing record of 58%. It's definitely showing a trend, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think it's a real reflection that the Scottish people have of their confidence in the SNP and the SNP government to deliver for them. I think they've consistently heard Nicola, talk and advocate on our behalf, and consistently been shut down by the Tory government. And we saw that, when we didn't get a seat at all, at the Brexit negotiations, even though we were supposed to be, the four nations were supposed to be this family of nations, and our voice was utterly silenced on that, because obviously we didn't want Brexit in the first place. I think now, as we see things come into fruition and the detrimental effects of that upon us, I think before people really had this feeling, and I certainly had that in 2014, knocking on the doors, is that people were happy with the status quo and they were scared of change. And now they realise that, that's not an option anymore for anyone. That is not an option. We can't just stay the same. And we're continually seeing the UK government drift away from what we feel and what we believe the path that we want to follow as a nation, as a country. And even Nicola being able to, have that time to show how great of a leader she actually is. And this is when you see the making of a leader, it is during these times, and it's really unfortunate, the basic fact we're going through a pandemic at this time anyway, and to have Brexit and the pandemic, coming together at the same time and hitting us like this, but to show that this consistent, strong leadership, and it gives us a sense of safety and security. And I think that's what people really want right now. They just want to be able to live their normal, regular lives, and not be washed away by all this chaos. And however much the opposition parties say that independence referendum is more chaos, it is not. It is actually the anchor in this storm.
Yeah.
And the people see that.
Okay, Karen, thank you for that. So, Siobhan, Karen saying there that she thinks that people are now beginning to see that the new status quo is actually much more risky and uncertain than being independent. Do you think this is something which is dawning on the public now?
Yeah, I think so. I think that picking up on something that Karen was saying, that the unfortunate circumstances of COVID has allowed us to see a Scotland that can manage chaos, it can manage difficulty, but it can do it in a safe, secure and stable way. And I think the Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government, it reflects how we see ourselves as a country now. I think that we are that anchor, as Karen had said. We are living in the last 6-7 years has been change and chaos and trauma imposed upon us. Absolutely imposed upon us. Brexit, COVID, a Brexiteer in COVID. And now we have a situation where we are beginning to take some control. And that control has offered us stability, and it's offering us safety and security. And I absolutely agree with Karen. I think that is what the people of Scotland want. This feels a wee bit post-45 as well, is that after all that difficulty, all that vortex of chaos, we want to just settle down and go on with our own lives and find some dry land to just, plant my little house on and get on with life and make sure that everybody's safe and secure. And I think the Scottish Government reflects that. I think it reflects the aspirations of what the people of Scotland actually want now. Do you know what we want to say? After all those years of being told that we're being sidelined, we want to say, and never has it been more important now to have a say. What's interesting about the poll, of course, is that even if the undecideds, the 10% that were undecided, voted no, we would still win. Yes, would still win. So there's a big gap there, and it's widening ever still. I think there's confidence there, and there's a decision. We know now what we want. Yeah, and I think that has come. COVID has allowed us to assess that, I think, a bit better.
So Siobhan, you feel that COVID has kind of allowed us to sort of put things under the microscope, if you pardon the kind of medical expression. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's exacerbated and shown us some of the problems that we have in society. I think it's certainly shown us what competent government and what incompetent government is. We're watching that parallel side by side. We're looking at Nicola Sturgeon going, yeah, okay. We're looking at Boris Johnson, and he is bouncing all over the place and basically giving money to his cronies in order to set up X, Y, and Z. Look at the school meals fiasco. Yes. That would never happen in Scotland, and we know that now.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much, Siobhan, for that. Our next story now is actually about the Conservative Party. The Tories have been blasted for fishing industry complacency. The Tories have been blasted for sheer complacency when it comes to the Brexit delays, which are putting Scotland's seafood export industry at risk, after a senior Tory disregarded industry concerns and attempted to shift the blame for the Tories' Brexit chaos. In an interview with the BBC, Scotland Office Minister David Duguid was asked how long it would take to fix the supply chain problems caused by Brexit. He responded, "How long is a piece of string?" Jamie McMillan, the managing director of Lochfine Langoustines, told Good Morning Scotland programme that small Scottish seafood companies are being put out of business by Brexit delays. He asked the Tory MPs to stop lying to the Scottish fishing industry, which he said was dismayed about being led down the garden path by Boris Johnson. Yesterday, the Tory government's fisheries minister faced calls to resign after admitting that she had not fully read the details of the damaging Brexit deal on fisheries because she was very busy organising the local nativity trail. Karen, this story... This story about fishing obviously has been front and centre for a while. I've just been told that we have a little bit more on this story, and the SNP had said that Boris Johnson must urgently deliver a major Brexit compensation package for Scotland's fishing communities, after the Tory government appeared to roll back on commitments made by the Prime Minister in Parliament yesterday. With Downing Street and Tory Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Secretary George Eustace both appearing to U-turn on Boris Johnson's promise to compensate fishing businesses at yesterday's liaison committee, Ian Blackford MP said that the Prime Minister must announce a meaningful package of Brexit compensation without further delay. The SNP Westminster leader said the Tories will never be trusted again by the people of Scotland after the litany of lies, false claims, broken promises to Scotland's fishing communities. Now, Karen, I know that you will be standing as candidate in Banff and Buchan, and of course up in that part of Scotland, it's famous for fishing, isn't it? How are the fishing communities taking to the current delays?
So it's I'll just correct you.
Sorry?
It's Banffshire and Buchan Coast constituency.
Okay.
But Banffshire and Buchan Coast, I think I might get berated on Twitter for this if this is wrong, but it's about, because you need to be quite specific with these things, but it's around about 40% of the seafood sector is within Banffshire and Buchan Coast. Right. And and rightly so, they're absolutely furious. And in particular, David Duckett, who is the Banff and Buchan MP, and who got his seat on the ticket of this promise of this fantastic sea of opportunity deal that he was going to be delivering for them. Now, the position is that they have lied. They have told lies. And if they were mistaken, they haven't come out and put their hands up and said, okay, honest mistake, we were wrong here, this is what we're going to do to rectify everything. No, instead they've came around, they're pointing the fingers at the SNP government for saying that we didn't have provisions in place. Well, excuse me, if their fisheries minister can't even read the document, how are we supposed to have any time to prepare for anything of their making, and without, we're touching upon here, Boris Johnson should be compensating the fishing industry. Absolutely, he must, but he should have put more time, effort, and cash into this in the first place to help ease all of this, instead of saying it was going to be this seamless transition, which it's not. Businesses are closing. People are against the wall. I mean, this is people's livelihoods. We have a constituency that is highly dependent upon this industry, and they really looked to those Scottish Conservative parliamentarians to deliver this for them, and they've just completely sold them out. There's so much more complexities to this as well, regarding quota swaps and things, and the powers of that being taken out the hands of the producers. A lot of skippers are quite worried about that and concerned how that's going to work for them. So there's actually, down to the detail of this deal, it has not been communicated directly exactly what was going to happen to them. And it was just it wasn't even 11th hour, it was past the midnight hour of this happening for them. It's just an absolute disgrace, and to be gaslighting the fishing community now and to be pointing to the fingers towards, let's go and blame them and taking no responsibility is absolutely, it's not shocking, is it really? But
no,
it's disgusting.
Expected, I think, wasn't it? But it's worse than people feared.
Yeah, it was expected by some, and we did think that, these things were going to happen. But at the same time, to see it play out in action in real time is utterly heartbreaking. I mean, it really is. Who's standing up for these communities now? I mean, I'm a local councillor at the moment, and I even knew, within my job and within my remit within that, getting the health certificates organised and getting people trained and to be able to have that level of certification to be able to do that as well. It's a mammoth task.
Yeah.
And we're already against the wall, really, at council level, local authorities dealing with this pandemic and budget constraints, and it's just absolutely devastating. Yeah, they've just hung us out to dry, Absolutely.
Okay, Karen, thanks very much. Siobhan, very, very briefly, if you would. Karen was just saying there that there's not been any time for the fishing communities to prepare. And we've heard from the Tory fisheries minister hadn't even read the bill, which explained how the fishing industry was supposed to operate. I mean, this is ridiculous, isn't it?
It's quintessential Boris Johnson government, isn't it? I mean, they promise the world and then never deliver. And you know, there's a real throwing the fishing communities to the wolves here, and I really feel for them, actually, because I think that they accepted the promise on good faith. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And a lot of the smaller fishermen are going to be affected from this as well. And as Karen said, we're talking about a Brexiteer COVID society now, and it's chaos on top of chaos, problem, financial issues on top of financial issues. Compensation, then let's get rid of the Boris Johnson government while we're at it, please.
Okay, Siobhan, thank you very much. Now, to Ireland and Scotland, who have published a bilateral review of their future relationship. The Irish Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, and the Scottish Cabinet Secretary for External Affairs, Michael Russell, have today published the Ireland-Scotland Joint Bilateral Review Report. Following wide consultations between the two governments and substantial public engagement, the report sets out a series of joint actions to be taken in the areas of business and the economy, and community and diaspora, culture and academic and research links, and rural, coastal and island communities, as well as government and political relations. At the heart of the review report is a shared understanding of the importance of securing the closest possible relationship between Scotland and Ireland, as well as between the UK and Ireland for the coming years. With over 40 recommendations across 5 thematic areas, the report will guide Ireland-Scotland collaboration over the coming 5 years. These include regular high-level contact between the Scottish and Irish ministers and continued cooperation through the British-Irish Council and institution of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And also a new Scotland-Ireland Trade Task Force supported by the Consulate General of Ireland in Edinburgh and by the Scottish Government Office in Dublin, which will work with the public and private sectors to develop and support trade relations. A conference this year to address the opportunities and challenges of living in rural, coastal and island communities, to be convened by both governments, working with the University of the Highlands and Islands, Nagilthach, I apologise, 1500 celebrations, and reflecting the international legacy of this pivotal figure in our shared cultural, legal and ecclesiastical history. There will also be shared Irish and Scottish diaspora and heritage events to take place in the US and Canada this year. Other recommendations envisage deeper cooperation on health issues, a new framework for cooperation on education, research and development of offshore renewable energy technologies, and exploring together how to increase participation and inclusivity in sport. The Cabinet Secretary and Minister will meet today to mark the publication and to look ahead at future collaborations. Let me start with you this time, Siobhan. This sounds like an excellent idea, and it also seems, to me at least, to point to the Scottish Government preparing for independence. Would you say that that's a reasonable supposition to make here?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's preparing to become an independent nation within Europe, isn't it? Forging, I mean, if you look at, Ireland's relationship to Europe is exactly what I think that Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government has been aspiring to. We've had strong links with Ireland. It's a great initiative. It's a wonderful initiative. Do you know what? It's Scotland kind of sticking its head above the parapet now and beginning to kind of peek out and start forging formal relationships with other countries out with the gaze of the UK, which is what we really need to do, because we need to act and think independently and forge our own relationships across the globe. And I think that this is one of the steps towards this new modern European independent Scotland, aspiring to what Ireland is now at the moment. Yeah.
Aspiring to be normal, Siobhan.
Yes, pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Karen, what was your reaction to the publication of this report? I mean, we've just been discussing the fact that this would kind of normalise relations, but I suspect, and perhaps my understanding of constitutional affairs isn't that brilliant, but I was I was always taught that foreign affairs was a reserved matter. Is this a little bit cheeky, do you think?
Absolutely not. I think, hands across the water, Celtic connections, Celtic cousins. What a fantastic thing. And I would say we're not just preparing for independence, we're acting like we are an independent country, as we should, because we just need to be getting on, as we keep getting told, to get on with the day job. And this is part of it. We're part of an international community. We're not this nationalistic, backwards looking insular country. We're an internationalist country, and we always have been. And I think in contrast, we look at how we're looking forward to garner relations with people, particularly in the renewable sector. I mean, that is absolutely something that we should be having communications with other countries on. And we look at the chaos that's being created on the other hand, by the UK government. And here's us, we're getting on with the job. We're making these pivotal relationships, collaborations. And I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I haven't had time. I know there's about 40 recommendations.
Yeah, it's very sort of wide ranging.
About 5 years. Yeah, it is. So obviously it's something I'll probably have to have a wee read in detail about that. But just skimming over it and understanding what it's for and what it's about it's wonderful. It's a really great thing. It's a positive thing, and we should be really shouting about this.
Okay, Karen. Well, you have shouted about it, and you'll be viewed by thousands tonight, I'm sure. Anyway, we're moving on now, and it would appear that self-isolation support misses those in the so-called gig economy. Current arrangements for supporting people to self-isolate does not reach people in the gig economy. National Clinical Director Jason Leach has acknowledged. At the Scottish Parliament's COVID Committee, Scottish Greens MSP Mark Ruskell followed up on Green calls to widen financial and practical support for self-isolation. The current self-isolation grant is only available to people on benefits. Mr. Leach said, "We've tried as much as we can with the public health advice to employers, to individuals and communications to tell people this is the most important thing that you can do. But if you're getting asked to self-isolate for the second or third time and you are an Uber driver or in the gig economy somewhere, or you're a student, that is not as straightforward as it is for you or I. We have to be conscious of that in the support that we give." Responding, Mark Ruskell said, self-isolation is an absolutely essential part of stopping the spread of the virus. But as the clinical director acknowledges, many workers are faced with a choice between doing it or losing their income. For months, the Scottish Greens have been calling for widening the criteria for financial and practical support for self-isolation. And Jason Leach has made our case for us. Okay, let me come to you first, Siobhan, on this. Now, it is important. I myself have been in the position of having to self-isolate a few months ago and had to apply for this grant from my local council. And it was quite difficult to get it as a self-employed person if, as he was pointing out, you're not receiving benefits. Do you think there's a case here for widening the criteria, as Mark Ruskell has suggested?
Yeah, I think there has to be. If you look at the public health advice, if you look at the countries that have done well in managing COVID, then a financial support package, a robust financial support package, is something that's essential. There's a blame culture developing, not necessarily so much in Scotland, but a blame culture, I think, coming from Westminster, is that it's all the public's fault, that they're not isolating, that they're not sticking to the rules, etc., etc. But do you know what? See, when it's really difficult, when you're having to struggle to, work to kind of feed your kids or kind of isolate and maybe hope for the best, that's difficult. We do need more robust packages. It's something I think that offers us a kind of bit of a case as to what we could have done had we been independent. Like we could have done, like most other half kind of sensible countries that come from a public health strategy, would have set up better, more robust, more safer approaches to people that had to isolate. Isolation's difficult. It's extraordinarily difficult if you are worried about loss on your money.
Yeah, I know from bitter experience, Siobhan, exactly what that's like.
From a collective good point of view, from a public health point of view, we do have to try the best we can.
Okay, Siobhan, thank you very much. Karen, what's your view on this? The sort of support that's available for people self-isolating was, if I remember correctly, £500, and that was in a fund held by local authorities, but many people have reported difficulties in getting hold of it.
I think, we have to acknowledge in the first instance that those within the gig economy are already on the back foot here. There was already issues with their employment, the standards of employment and regulation around that anyway. These people were already living in a situation that maybe wasn't particularly stable for them. I mean, my son-in-law was one of the people that didn't have a renewed contract because it came up, to end.
Yes.
And people who are doing this to people, your contract's due to end instead of renewing it. Oh, you know what? There's a pandemic going on. They can get out of that, supporting their employees by ending the contract there and there. And that was a direct family member, a casualty of that. And there has to absolutely be more support for people in these situations. People need to eat. People need to pay rent. People need to have access to benefit. If we look at universal credit, people are saying, you can apply for universal credit. Well, the issue with that is that you've got a 5-week wait for that.
That's right.
For that to come through. What are people going to do within that 5 weeks? So yes, we absolutely need more support. And, as Siobhan touched upon there, as if we did have all those powers within ourselves as an independent country, we could even have something like universal basic income. We could have had a catch-em-all, system that wouldn't have to see all this, because at the end of the day, I think when
I was going to say, Siobhan, if Scotland was able to, if Scotland was able to control its own taxation, for example, and then people who are in the gig economy who make a tax return every year could simply be given a tax handout. They could be given a tax break. So many ways it could be done.
I mean, and we're also seeing, if the UK government are able to hand out all these huge contracts to their mates that are managing to make a fair packet off of poverty in a pandemic, I'm sure they could put their hand in their pocket for those that are really struggling and really needing it right now. And it's a political choice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, thank you very much for that, Karen. We're going to move on now and cross the Atlantic. And Donald Trump is to become the first US president to be impeached twice. Donald Trump, whose turbulent 4-year term in office is due to end next Wednesday, became the first president in US history to be impeached twice, when the Democrat-led House yesterday voted 232 to 197 to charge him with inciting an insurrection. 10 of Trump's fellow Republicans joined Democrats in approving the single article of impeachment. Republicans joined the Democrats in approving the single article of impeachment. The swift impeachment will be unlikely to lead to Trump's removal before Biden takes office on January the 20th. The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, rejected Democratic calls for a quick trial in the Republican-led chamber, saying that there was no way to finish it before Trump leaves office. If Trump is already out of the White House, historical precedent suggests that the Senate could disqualify him from holding office in the future with only a simple majority vote. McConnell has said that no trial could begin until the Senate was scheduled to be back in regular session on Tuesday. The President-elect Joe Biden has urged Senate leaders to avoid a bitter trial during his first days in the White House so that they can focus on the economy and getting the coronavirus vaccine distribution program on track and confirming crucial cabinet nominees. I hope that the Senate leadership will find a way to deal with their constitutional responsibilities on impeachment while also working on the other urgent business of this nation, Biden said in a statement on Wednesday night. Biden's inauguration has been scaled back due to security concerns and the COVID-19 pandemic. The west front of the Capitol building, where the swearing-in occurs, is now fortified by fencing, barriers, and thousands of National Guard troops. Under the Constitution, impeachment in the House triggers a trial in the Senate. A two-thirds majority would be needed to convict and remove Trump, meaning at least 17 Republicans in the 100-member chamber would have to join the Democrats. Senior Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, set to become the majority leader this month, said that no matter the timing, there will be an impeachment trial in the United States Senate. There will be a vote on convicting the president for high crimes and misdemeanors. And if the president is convicted, there will be a vote on barring him from running again. House leaders does not say when they would formally send the charge to the Senate for consideration. Karen, this is a fascinating saga that just seems to go on and on. But Donald Trump seems to be unique in American history as the only president ever to be impeached twice. It's an unenviable record, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, there was a very poignant tweet from me actually that came out after the attack on the Capitol, and it said, oh, well, we haven't seen this coming for the last 4 years. And I think it's really important to remember that these things happen slowly but surely, and to certain people. Some of us, okay, we might see what's happening. We can tell what how a person is, how they're acting, what they're saying.
Yeah.
But when that person is saying things that you want to hear, these populist politicians, it's easy to get entrapped within that, and people have just fallen blindly for it. And what we're seeing now is an attack on the American democracy. I have a friend actually who lives in northwest of the United States, who is a fully fledged, paid up member of the Republican Party, who did not vote Trump, and who has been trying desperately to highlight all the issues with him and what's happened now with friends, family, and he does this podcast, trying to let people know and see what's happening. Because he really hasn't been blind to that. And the main point that's coming across there, with his viewers and what they're saying, is that it really was, in some ways, unexpected that it was going to get to this level, that this was actually going to happen. It's not until it happens that they were really taken aback and shocked that actually this is a real danger to our democratic system right now.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. Siobhan, I think the storming of the Capitol building was termed a coup de main. In other words, a surprise attack in French. But was it really a surprise? People have been apparently shocked by what happened. But as Karen was saying, many commentators have seen this coming for 4 years.
Well, I mean, the minute that he came into power, it was always my concern that it wasn't necessarily what he would do in government. It was his whipping up of the racist, far-right mob that was always going to be a problem. So no, this wasn't a surprise to me. But I'll tell you, it is an absolute deep shock, I think, to the American public and to the American government. I think they've recognised a real sense of genuine horror here. I mean, it's worth pointing out that Nancy Pelosi, and she leaked this, and she's usually very discreet, she leaked this in that she had to phone the armed forces to make sure that he did not get access to the nuclear codes. This was how terrified the American government was. And, congratulations to the Constitution, because there was an element that it held the line here a little bit.
Yeah,
the army has an allegiance to the Constitution.
Yeah,
not the president. And there is an element there. My friend, who's from Louisiana, big call out to Jen here, but she was saying this throughout all this time where he was making up, it was fixed, the election was fixed. She kept saying, this is a test for the Constitution, this is a test for the Constitution. But there's something fundamental here, I think, is that this is, in the same way that Scotland is beginning to look at itself as a nation and decide what it wants, this is a turning point for America and what they're deciding on what they want. And I think that the impeachment and the Senate legal action, it has to be done. It has to be done for America to understand and show future generations and to show the world and to show themselves that there are lines by which the government and the Constitution will not cross.
Siobhan.
And those lines are trying to overthrow the government, because it was a coup. It was an attempted coup, and it was a bloody one as well, because there was a policeman murdered.
Siobhan, Siobhan, I just had one other question for you, and that was, I think it's dawned on many people that America has had a severe endemic race problem for decades.
Yeah.
Do you think that this will perhaps go some way if Trump is impeached and he is convicted of high crimes and misdemeanors and barred from holding office again? Do you think it's going to force American lawmakers to have another look at the race issue and the way that things are policed in the United States?
I hope so. I hope so. And you know what? Respect to Biden for in his speech when he made it very clear that most people in America knew if that was a Black Lives Matter protest, the police would have been down there and the armed guard would have been down there within minutes, and Donald Trump would have sent them in. There was a real racial element to that they allowed the white supremacists to move in there. Yes, there's fundamental issues. I think that it's the race problem in America runs centuries, doesn't it? Yeah. It's very difficult. But bearing in mind as well, the Confederate flag was a real shock in the Capitol. My friend was freaking out at that. The Confederate flag in the Capitol.
It's a racist
it was a very,
symbol,
very
isn't
difficult
it, now?
one. Yes, it really is. It really is. And it defiled was the word that my friend used. It defiled that democratic process. I think that there are problems because I think that they're, taking my friend's experience, whose family all voted Trump, they're terrified of Biden. There's real fear there being whipped up as to what Biden will do. There is a genuine loyalty in a very kind of cultish sense to Donald Trump here, and I think that it would be folly for the American government to think that this will be over with the legal action. I think that we might begin to see issues, and I think Biden has a lot of work cut out for him.
He certainly does. Okay, well, listen, thank you both very much. And now we're moving to Russia. And Russia says that it will seek Alexei Navalny's arrest. Moscow Prison Service announced today that it would take all measures necessary to arrest the Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny when he returns to Russia this weekend. A move that could be a prelude to him being jailed for 3.5 years. Navalny, one of President Vladimir Putin's fiercest opponents, has said that he will fly back to Russia on Sunday for the first time since he was taken to Germany for treatment in August following his poisoning with a Novichok nerve agent. The Kremlin denies involvement in his poisoning and says that it has no evidence that he was poisoned and that he is free to return to Russia at any time. But Navalny faces a growing list of legal threats at home, including separate criminal cases for alleged slander and fraud, both of which he says are false and politically motivated. The most immediate threat is from the Moscow Prison Service, the FSIN. The prison service said in a statement that Navalny, 44, was on a national wanted list because he had last year repeatedly failed to report at least twice a month to them under the terms of his suspended sentence on embezzlement charges. It has applied to a court to convert his suspended sentence of 3.5 years into real jail time. Navalny says that the original 2014 embezzlement conviction, in which he and his brother were found guilty of stealing more than 30 million rubles from 2 companies, was trumped up. He said that he could not report at the end of last year as he was being treated as an outpatient in Germany. The Kremlin, which refers to Navalny only as the Berlin patient, says it is up to the relevant law enforcement agencies to decide how he is treated. Karen, let me take your reaction to this first. Mr. Navalny seems to be public enemy number 1, doesn't he, in Russia? How does this man manage to sleep at night? I mean, he must be looking over his shoulder the whole time.
I mean, absolutely. And I think, it's really a stark warning to us of what happens when you live in an anti-democratic country, when you're living in a near dictatorship. And I think we really need to heed, if we're going to take anything from this, if there's nothing much we can do, or to pass on to Russia, but really with being part of this global society, we have really a duty to be examples of democracy as well. And I think that's the important part that I took from hearing from this news. I mean, it's absolutely it's abhorrent, and it's terrifying that these kind of things that that people watch on movies or whatever, or Netflix or whatever, but these things are really happening around the globe, and we really have to be aware of that, and to make sure that the small incremental steps towards an anti-democratic society doesn't happen to us.
Okay, thanks very much, Karen. Siobhan, Karen's just been highlighting the fact that we see what it's like when somebody is living in an authoritarian or a dictatorial place. And let's face it, Mr. Putin seems to be like a magician. He can make people disappear whenever he feels like it.
It certainly does. I mean, it's an interesting historical parallel, isn't it? That in America at the moment, what you've got is a president trying to overthrow the democratic will, and the President-elect Biden, and then on the other side of the globe, you have someone trying to pop off the opposition. So these are, as Cam said, very, very difficult times, and sometimes we look at other countries, and we see it much more clearly.
Yeah.
But we have to be very, very careful for the anti-democratic little steps, as Karen says, that
Yes.
happens within our own society. It's not by any way a parallel in terms of its significance, but
Yeah.
we look back to the Brexit deal and how the government was forced to include Parliament in the Brexit deal. That was a fundamentally anti-democratic structure that was only
Yes.
really protected by the legal constitution that was there. And thank God for that. But it's those type of steps
Yes.
that the next thing democracy is pretty much eroded away. And we've seen that throughout history numerous times. It's you're sitting there one day going, yeah. The next minute it's all going kind of screwy and we're all living under a dictatorship type thing. But so it is. It's something, as Kant said, we really do need to be very, very mindful of.
Okay.
Democracy in another country should be just as important to everyone across the globe, because everyone's democracy is fragile now, and I think there's an element, if we're looking here, it's more fragile than ever if you look at the situation of America, and it's something that we really need to protect.
Okay, Siobhan, that's an excellent way to finish that particular story. Now, the death of the Bishop Emeritus Vincent Logan has been reported today. And following the death today of Bishop Emeritus Vincent Logan, the President of the Bishops' Conference of Scotland, Bishop Hugh Gilbert, has issued the following statement. It is with a heavy heart that we mourn the loss of Vincent Logan, the retired Bishop of Dunkeld. The Bishops of Scotland offer our deep condolences and a promise of our prayers to Bishop Stephen Robson and all the clergy and the people in the Diocese of Dunkeld as they remember Bishop Vincent. Coming only a day after the death in Glasgow of Archbishop Philip Tartaglia, marks this week as one of loss and mourning for the Catholic Church in Scotland. Bishop Vincent Logan was dedicated and energetic. His episcopal ordination in 1981 at the age of 39 made him one of the youngest bishops in the world and gave him an energy and a zeal in all that he did. His commitment to Catholic education was well known, and his robust defence of it will be long remembered. On behalf of the Bishops of Scotland, we commend his soul into the hands of God and pray that he may enjoy eternal rest. It's not often we report on the death of a clergyman, is it, Karen? But this man seems to have been quite a remarkable man.
Sorry, I can hear that talking, so it's distracting me. Yeah.
That's okay.
No, am I right in saying that was COVID?
I'm not certain about that. I don't think it was. No, I don't think it was.
Yesterday.
It's possibly COVID, I think, is what we've heard.
I think it's always, yeah.
Yeah. So we've had two bishops dying, one after the other, one day and one the next. It is quite a sad day for the Catholic Church.
I would absolutely say so. And in particular, when you have this leadership and people you look up to for that, direction and comfort through the times that we're going through right now as well, and during this pandemic, I think it's going to be particularly sad and poignant for them to feel that loss within their community, and absolutely devastating.
Okay, Siobhan, I mean, I don't know whether you're a particularly religious person, but as I say, we don't often report on the death of a religious figure, certainly not two in 2 days. It is a very sad day.
I mean, yeah, I'm not religious anymore, but I was brought up Catholic, so priests were a positive influence actually on my life. And Vincent Logan rings a bell, and I was looking earlier to see if he was Fed Dundee. But yes, it is a sad time, and I think it's to pick up on something that Karen says. I when there's faith. And there's that kind of loss. It's such a difficult time as well, because remember, we are going through extraordinarily difficult times because of COVID.
The church is playing a role, isn't it?
No, it's not. There is spiritual leadership and comfort there. Coming from an ex-Catholic, I understand that very, very quite deeply. And so, grievances and condolences, I think, to people who feel that loss. I suppose that's the only thing I could say for that.
Thank you, Siobhan. Okay, on to our final story this evening. Victim Surcharge Fund is open for new applications. A new fund to help organisations to provide support for victims of crime using money paid by offenders has opened for applications. The Victim Surcharge Fund, drawn from additional financial levies imposed on all offenders who receive a court fine, has opened to bids from organisations that provide direct support to victims of crime and their families. Payments have been made into the fund since the regulations establishing the victim surcharge were passed on the 25th of November 2019. The fund currently stands at £87,020. Victim support organisations that successfully apply to the fund can use it to provide financial assistance to cover the costs of short-term and practical support, such as new windows or locks for victims of house break-ins, or funeral expenses for families of murder victims. Karen, this is a great idea, isn't it? Actually taking money from fines and using it for a good purpose to help victims of crime.
I think it's absolutely an appropriate way to use that money. For people to know as well that, that's their fines are paying and contributing towards that. And for them to have that, tangible loss of income, to see that is going towards the victims of crime. And there's never, victimless crimes. And often the financial impact is very, very real to many victims. And I don't think we can really see the magnitude of how it impacts people, because it could be perhaps weeks and months of maybe missing work, etc., because of the crime that has been committed onto them.
The trauma of that
absolutely.
as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, very briefly, Siobhan, what do you think of this idea of using money from fines to help the victims of crime?
Yeah. It's a really nice idea, isn't it? I think that it's this kind of like circular approach where people are kind of forced to give something back to the victims that have been subjected
balance,
to it.
Isn't it?
I think it is. I mean, it's quite a lot of money as well, and it can offer kind of practical and tangible kind of support. I would like to see something beyond the fines in the sense of that maybe more community service to give something back to the community and allow people who have committed those crimes to understand a bit more on a personal level the impact that it does have. And I think that would kind of complete that circle a bit more, actually. But yeah, it's a great start. I think it's a template of what we could do as an independent Scotland and where our priorities begin to lie.
Okay, Siobhan, thank you very much. That just about brings us to the end of the programme tonight. But as usual, I have to remind you that Broadcasting Scotland is running a major crowdfunder at the moment. We are looking for your help to cover all the major events that are coming up in 2020. And of course, there will be many of those. And we rely on your donations to help make programmes like Scotland at 7. So if you'd like to help us by becoming a supporter, you can do so by following the instructions on our website. Just go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register to find out more details. That is about it from us tonight. Just remains for me to thank my two guests, Karen Adam, the SNP candidate for Banff and Buchan, and Siobhan Tolland, the writer and activist. Thank you both very much. And from all of us here at Scotland at 7, a very good night to you.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
an independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged?
Best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.